Hello friends, this is Andrew yet again, and this today is episode 130. And we're continuing in our series in Matthew's Gospel. Jesus has come down from the Mount of Transfiguration with his executive. He's encountered the rest of his disciples and a large crowd and healed a boy with a parent with epilepsy. And so we pick up the narrative of what happens next in Matthew 17 verses 22 and 23. As they were gathering in Galilee, some translations say it was in Capernaum, which makes sense, Jesus said to them, "The Son of Man is going to be betrayed into human hands, and they will kill him, and on the third day he will be raised." And they were greatly distressed. The disciples seem to have a fairly extreme negative reaction to Jesus talking about his suffering, death, and ultimate resurrection. The words that are used there are fairly extreme. What I realise as I've been reflecting on this is that grief is always personal. And it's mostly for ourselves, for what we have lost, for our hurt, for our pain, for our suffering. Jesus tells his disciples of what's awaiting him a little bit down the track. And there's a sense almost that Jesus seems okay with this. Not particularly overjoyed, I wouldn't have thought, but he's not paralysed by it either. As I said, the words that are used here to describe the disciples' reaction indicate a profound depth of feeling, negative feeling. It's worth noticing that they pick up on the suffering and death while ignoring the promise of resurrection. So what does that mean? Did they not hear that bit? Or does that seem fanciful? Does this mean they don't believe that bit? No, I don't think it's about that. I think that they're overwhelmed by the betrayal and death bit, and where they will likely be in the middle of all of this. This isn't turning out as they've expected, and so they've got a whole lot of other thoughts that are now crowding into their hearts and minds. See, I'm wondering if this is, in the end, it's all about them. Isn't it always about us? What will it mean for us? What will it mean for me? They have momentarily forgotten about Jesus. And at this point, they're more concerned for themselves. And they may be asking the question, well, if this happens, where will this leave me? Where will I be in all of this? Will I also be killed as one of his disciples? The promise of resurrection may be okay for him, but what about me? As a minimum, this is going to be very unpleasant. I'm not sure that I signed up for this. I'm wondering if they're suddenly faced with a reality that comes completely out of left field for them. That they'd imagine that this Jesus project was just going to continue to build, continue to gather momentum, to gather steam. And it was going to carry on for years, and it was going to become a truly wonderful thing. Their dream might have been that eventually the whole nation would be changed. All would become enthusiastic followers in the Jesus movement. And they'd be sitting at the top of it all. Alongside Jesus, of course. And now Jesus tells them it isn't going to end like that at all. And then not ending like that is going to happen soon. Very soon. And there are parts of it that are going to be extremely unpleasant. I can imagine them feeling that suddenly the foundations on which their lives have been built over the last 2.5 to 3 years are starting to get a bit wobbly. They thought they had a future in this, and suddenly it looks like it's going to end really soon. And what does that mean for them? I've observed grief down through the decades. I'm going to start by suggesting that rarely has it been for the person who's died. Not that saying it never is, but I think often the grief is for ourselves. It's what we've lost. Having said that, it makes sense to grieve for a lost potential, for someone who could have had so much life before them, some talented, gifted superstar who has been cut off in their prime. It makes sense to grieve in that situation. It makes sense to grieve for someone who died out of relationship, so to speak. One who had fallen out with others and for whom reconciliation failed to happen. That's always got to be a source of pain, doesn't it? Particularly if you're one of the ones who that person has fallen out with and know that there's now no chance this side of eternity of making it right. Or we could grieve for someone who was consumed by bitterness and hatred. How awful. It makes sense to grieve for someone who finished life like that. And this leads me in deeper. To grieve for those who have unfinished business, who have left much of life half done. Commitments made, projects started, little ever and most never completed. And we can grieve for someone who has frittered their lives away, never exercising or reaching up to the special gift that was them, never becoming all or even a significant or even much of what they could have been, never entering the fullness of kingdom of heaven kind of life that Jesus invites us into. It seems that after all there is much that we can grieve for others. Yet at the same time, grief is also a mirror. It shows us ourselves. This is one of the positive things about funerals. I was privileged to lead a 2.5-hour celebration of a life of one of our people a little while back. One who had lived fully and well, an extraordinary individual. We had an intermission in the middle of it because we knew it was going to be long, but it was great. It was great. It's a reminder, though, to all of us that our time here is finite, that death comes to us all. It may be, as we've been considering those whom we might grieve over, that we have seen ourselves. While we're alive, there is still opportunity to make change, or at least to start making change. And I kind of think it's the direction that's important. It's the trajectory that we're now on. Even if at the end we do a 90-degree turn and start heading in another direction, if it's positive, that's a good thing. Even if we never arrive, even if we never tick off all the things on our list that we recognise that we should have done years ago, at least we're moving in a new direction, and if it's life-giving, it's a great thing. I've sometimes wondered why some die young and others at a great old age. Is that for some their work of who they're becoming, the kind of trajectory their life is on is already well underway, and that it's okay for them to go? And that for others, the grace of God continues to work away, giving opportunity after opportunity to discover that grace, that life itself is grace, before they finally hang up their clogs. I've wondered, hoping that before the end that there's some that will just make that turn, make that switch, and at least reorient their lives again toward life, toward God, toward that which is loving and life-giving. Reflection on death is also an invitation to consider why we're here. I work on the assumption that we're all here for a reason, that there is a contribution that we're each invited to make to the whole, and that this contribution will in some way be life-giving to the whole, life-giving to others. It may be that you've never considered this. I'd be surprised. I want to offer you a way of discovering this if you've not. And the question might be, and I'm hoping that it might work for you. It might not, but it might. And I want to invite you to ask the question: how do you want to be remembered? What kind of legacy do you want to leave? There's a wonderful story that I love to tell of a businessman who's in a hotel. It's actually a true story in the sense that it both tells the truth and it's true in the sense that it really happened. Now, this businessman is on a business trip in a hotel in a far country. He's staying in a hotel. And he gets up in the morning and he opens the door and he gets a newspaper that's been left at the door and he spreads it out on the table, and he's horrified to read his own obituary. And the headline is, "Dynamite King Dies." And he reads this article with a sense of mounting horror and an awareness as he looks at this that he is going to be remembered as a merchant of death. It changes his life, or what remains of it. And we don't remember this man as the man who invented dynamite. His name? Alfred Nobel. He launched the Nobel Peace Prize because he wanted a different kind of legacy. This is a wake-up call for him. He wanted to be remembered differently. And so one of the most powerful exercises I've ever engaged in terms of this came from Stephen Covey of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People fame. And the purpose of this exercise is to discover what's important to us. So we're invited, and I'm inviting you to imagine a funeral. Your funeral. And to ask yourself, what is it we'd like to hear others say about us? How do we want to be remembered? What do we want to hear them say? The people around us, the people who are important to us. What do we want to hear them say about us at the funeral? It's an exercise worth giving some time to. And it can be very clarifying. It may be that you'll come to the conclusion that you've left your run too late. As I indicated before, it's never too late to make a new beginning. It's never too late to start being kind, to start being generous, to start being forgiving. It's never too late to start seeking healing and reconciliation in relationships. If not with those who have already died, at least with those who are still alive. This all started with Jesus talking about his own pending passion in Jerusalem and the reactions of his disciples. I wonder how Jesus felt about it. I wonder if he felt supported by them, or if he sensed that each of them had gone into themselves, which is what we all do, really, isn't it? Even as I was sitting and working on this, it went in a completely different direction from the one that I thought it was going to when I started. So I'm going to have to change the title. God bless you.